Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, MysterE. So, MysterE, how are you going today?
I am very well for IS. I noticed the new introduction. Very,
Yeah,
very sleek. I liked it.
and instead of Australia's number one prompt engineer, we have Australia's number one AI explorer. We have Kareem that's back with us. So, Kareem, how are you going today?
Good, thanks. Good, thanks. I'm loving this AI Explorer business. Hey,
Yeah,
Tell us what an AI explorer
yeah,
is compared to a
please.
prompt engineer.
I only came across this term recently, and then instantly I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." Yeah, I found out that there were these communities of people, and I haven't joined these communities by the way. But people who are, I guess, pushing AI to its limits, using different techniques to try to get the most out of large language models and really sort of identifying what their capabilities are. So these people, I guess, are testing our conventional thinking of what we think AI is capable of, and coming up with some really novel and interesting and unique stuff. So when I heard about it, I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of what I'm
Can
doing."
can you
So
give us an
I'm like,
example of what they're doing?
uh, look, actually, okay, you'll love this one.
Yes, please.
There's a new so Google released something called Notebook LM
Hmm.
recently, which is what it does is it's able to take a whole bunch of sources that you upload, up to 50 sources, each source maximum 500,000 words each, and and it allows you to interact with those sources. So you can ask it questions, you can ask it for summaries, timelines, briefings, study guides, FAQs, and it will be interactive with you on that, on like the content. And you can chop and change what content you want it to reference. But the really unique feature is it's capable of generating something called an audio overview, which is a deep dive podcast into whatever source material you upload. Now,
Oh, is this the stuff you were telling me about, Kareem?
yeah, I think I sent you a
Oh,
link actually.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. Did you actually listen to the podcast or?
Oh, I haven't had time, but what you
Okay.
were telling me was fascinating.
So what it does is it's able to generate a really like realistic human conversation, um, about literally anything that you upload, and like the level of like, do you guys remember when I was showing you the Chat GPT thing and the thematic analysis it was doing on Attack on Titan,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I showed you an example of it doing that on one of your podcast
yeah,
episodes.
yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
Okay, it does that, but like on steroids.
Right. So
Right.
like
So
you're saying
it goes deep.
you could feed it the Bible, the entire Bible,
But
and
like the
then
kinds of things that AI explorers will do.
yeah,
I heard of one instance where someone uploaded a transcript of the words poop and fart 1,000 times,
yeah.
just to see what it would say, what kind of conversation it would, and the and it came back with something like it really sounds like someone's like trying to take the piss out of us, or like someone's trying to make a joke out of this. Like, what possible reason could there be for you to upload the words poop and fart
Whoa.
1,000 times? Like,
Oh,
like, and
wow.
it started going into the nuance
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like, what
yeah.
is poop
Okay.
and fart? Uh,
Wow.
uh, uh, Another person uploaded details of the existence of the AI entities that are on the podcast. So it's a male and a female like podcast host. Yeah, and they're just
Mm.
having a back and forth conversation between them. It's incredibly realistic and lifelike. Yeah. Um, what this guy did was he informed the podcast host that they weren't real. Yeah, that they were that they were like AI creations, that all their memories were fabricated, like a whole bunch of stuff. And he got the podcast host to actually react to that information
Hmm.
as though they were discovering that they weren't real.
Yeah.
So like the guy goes like I tried to call my wife just because I needed to hear her voice to know she was real, and then when I called, no answer. Like this.
Wow, that's
So
insane.
like to come back to your original question, what do AI explorers do? They do that type of shit.
Right. So
Like we wouldn't find out how deep it could go if someone wasn't pushing the limits. So it's a
okay,
new technology.
yeah.
We don't know what like we know it can do cool stuff, but how cool?
Okay, so this might be because it's on my mind because my work at the moment they're actually bringing in a new program and we have to do all the testing for it. But what what I find interesting with what you have to do with those sort of projects is not only do you have to do testing, as in like, oh, does this feature actually work? But like, there's a process after you do testing, which is called negative testing, which is you
Yeah, red teaming.
deliberately try and break the
Yeah,
program or use it in ways that aren't intending for it,
yeah,
so you can see whether that sort of stress test um, whether the I guess the product actually handles
yeah.
what you wanted it to do. So are you saying that
I think there's
AI
overlap
explorers
there.
are like professional negative testers?
Look, I wouldn't go that far. I
Right.
think there's overlap in terms of what they do. Um, but I'd argue that like the type of stuff that I've seen is less around how do we break this thing, and more around what's the coolest thing we can possibly make it do.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's I do get what you're saying, and like officially they call it red teaming. Like pretty much
What do they call it?
red teaming. So there's blue
Where?
team and red team. Red team,
What's? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So blue team builds it up and makes sure it works. Red team
Yep.
finds a way to break it, basically.
Okay. Okay.
So like if you subject your software to rigorous like red team testing,
Hmm.
there's much less chance of anything going wrong.
Yeah,
Like
when it goes live.
mine's like, do you remember when do you remember when antivirus companies started realizing that hang on, the way to keep our stuff the safest is to go and hire hackers?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, so they'd
Yeah.
hire hackers to be like, can you break into our stuff? We just want to see if it's secure or not. It's the
yeah,
same sort of concept, but
yeah.
applied to like misuse and AI.
But an explorer sounds a little bit more liberal than that. Like, sounds like these people are getting access to programs that are open source kind of stuff, and then they're just
Look,
playing with them.
in fairness, I've spoken a whole lot about the term.
Yeah.
I don't. It resonated with me.
Mm.
Apparently, there's communities. I haven't joined any of the communities, so I
Yeah.
don't know what other people in this space are doing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it just happened to be a term that resonated with me. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah,
But it's more playful
trying to
though.
describe
People
for it.
who you're having a go, you're having a crack and using different programs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm finding out that it is capable of doing a whole lot of cool stuff that I don't think
Mm.
is obvious in the first instance. So
Mm.
like I'm using it to test a lot of ideas like these days,
Hmm.
and just round them out. I'm happy to share some with you later.
Well, it's pretty scary what you're describing there. If you can feed something a body of work and it can pretty convincingly create a very complex style of human conversation. Like podcasts are deep dives into topics by experts, etc., etc. So, that for AI just to do that so effortlessly really makes you kind of question as to like some of that, that doomsday kind of talk that happens surrounding the topic of AI, and everyone's like, oh, they're going to replace humans pretty soon, or there's this idea that like most content creators will be replaced soon because everything will just be done by AI. And like if what you're explaining is pretty authentic sounding, um, you know, wow, maybe this doomsday vision isn't so far-fetched after all.
Look, I think we're still going to need content creators, because really what this technology excels at doing is taking content that you feed it,
Yep.
generating some type of summary, generating
Yep.
some type of analysis about it, but you still need to feed content into it
Yeah.
in order for any of its outputs to be meaningful.
Yeah.
So,
And is that open source? Can anyone use that?
yeah, it's free as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
no,
like how do you upload stuff? Have you tried it?
yeah, I've been playing around with it heaps. It's done
Okay.
on my writing project at the moment. It's generated some fascinating insights about
Yeah.
like it will it's good at sort of telling you what would be on a normal person's mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to know what everyone else is thinking about something, like
Yeah.
it's a way to sort of gauge public reaction to something in the first instance. So
Yeah, right. And very interesting for people that are like us in the revolutionary sphere, which is heavily tied to politics. It's good to know what the zeitgeist is on a
yeah,
particular, particular potentially controversial topic and something that splits people. So it'd be good to know what a general kind of feelings and sentiments are
well,
towards
look, I
certain
mean,
things.
the potential for misuse is absolutely incredible as well.
Yeah.
There's a million things that could go wrong with this, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's yeah, like I mean, poop and fart is just the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe that's a good segue into today's topic because
Mm,
today's topic is about digital twins or digital twinning. And, whether something can be used for good or for ill, I think this is a pretty good topic. So I think where we can start off on is I actually did type into Copilot ChatGPT, hey, can you explain this concept to me as if I was a 6-year-old? And yeah, what it actually said to me was, hey, imagine you have a toy car and you're able to kind of scan it and get all the dimensions for it and put that structure of that toy car onto a tablet. Basically what you can do is if you move the car, it can also move the digital twin. And you're able to manipulate it, you're able to look at all the dimensions and get more information about it, which you can use to create simulations. And that's basically what it said a digital twin was. And it got into all these various topics about how that could be used for uh, urban planning, how it could be used for the healthcare system in order to do simulations as to whether somebody
Mm.
reacts to a certain drug or not, or that's a good treatment for a patient. And then it went into more democratic, direct democracy, by the way, use of digital twins, which I think would be incredibly interesting to talk about on the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. But we can definitely get into that today. But that was basically the gist of what Copilot told me what digital twinning was.
So look,
Yeah.
I'm still a bit sketchy on what digital twinning is. I was under the assumption that digital twinning was about the fact that there is a data trail that you have left behind as someone who surfs the internet. I'm assuming that you don't use like a VPN or something like that, but let's say you've got a trail of data that's associated with your name. And there are apps and companies out there that trade and follow your data around. And your digital twin is actually the specific fingerprint that you've left online because of your online interactions and all of the various ways that you've been tracked from website to website. I thought that's what your digital twin was.
It's entirely possible that there's like a manufacturer definition of what digital twinning is and what you're talking about, which is probably is it something because I haven't got to Yanis Varoufakis's book on techno-feudalism. Does he talk about digital twinning?
He talks about it in the sense of like data sovereignty. So the individual having rights over their own data. So there is another you that exists in the digital realm. Everybody has been online to a certain extent, and like they've used their email address or some type of signature that identifies them as a person online, and that's associated with you in the real world. So when you go on your phone and it's got your name on it, or when you're surfing the internet, like I said, you're logged into whatever profile, it's associated with your actual personal details, your physical person, and all of that data follows you around wherever you go online. And so, yes, Yanis Varoufakis goes into the idea that you should be in control of your data in terms of being able to deliberate or decide as to who gets access to your online ghost, this digital copy of yourself you're explaining in that race car analogy. So there's like a version of you, but as opposed to it being a version of you that's scanned and then put into the matrix, it's just a collection of data.
Yeah.
So the version of me would be everything associated with the MysterE channel, and like everything that I've ever searched on YouTube and Google, and every site I've ever visited that has cookies or some way of tracking me, all of those data points, every app that I have on my phone that records everything that I do, where my phone is, in terms of its geolocation, where I've taken pictures, where I've picked up my phone, where I've turned it off. Every time I've written a message into Facebook Messenger or something like that, it's recorded all of that data, and that follows you around like a shadow, but in terms of an online presence. And he talks about you having like the rights over that data, and he talks about it in the sense of kind of a new version of the labor theory of value. So you produce value by going online and leaving traces of yourself everywhere. And that data is valuable to big tech companies or advertisers or third-party companies somehow. So they actually have to pay you for your data, as opposed to you just signing up to terms and conditions for the sake of convenience and just throwing all of that value that you create away. So he's talking about it in terms of some type of level of ownership and control of your online person, the twin version of you that exists in the digital realm.
Well, it's entirely possible that both of those definitions are true. Like, you have on one side the more manufacturing concept of it, which is, every single sci-fi movie that you see where, they grab an image of something and then they put it on some sort of hologram, and maybe that can be classified as a digital twin, where they can do various simulations on it. But then the more abstract version of it, which is what Yanis is talking about, and what you're talking about, which is basically the paper trail of your digital presence. And really, if you're able to get all of that data and put it into a vessel, it's effectively your digital self.
Yes. That's the type of twin that I had envisaged, as opposed to like a matrix kind of twin, when you plug yourself in and you're online and you're in digital form, but you're just online.
Okay, well then let's agree for this conversation to say that it's the Yanis, or the data-driven digital self, the digital paper trail, rather than the Marvel sci-fi Tony Stark putting it on a screen, the Jarvis. Yeah.
It's still an abstract concept in terms of like the existence of the digital twin itself, because like as you describe it, at this stage, it's simply a collection of data that like people organizations are using, like for the most part, in order to better market services towards you. Like that's kind of how it exists with
that was very diplomatic of you, Kareem. Very diplomatic of you.
As much as possible. That's the reality of it. The times when it has been that data has been used for other purposes, and I mean, like it can inform like other areas of government. So, say for example, like health trends, like that stuff can help inform policy decisions with regards to healthcare. Like this is where some of your data is actually valuable in terms of government. But for like the nefarious uses of this data primarily revolve around marketing, and the reality is that one of the dirty secrets is that yeah, there are AI systems that are specially designed in order to go over these data sets and spot patterns in terms of your consumption habits. And when they spot these patterns in your consumption habits, they can then optimize their product or service offering towards the highest likelihood of getting your money, basically. So, like a really good example of this is, you know how when you're about to cancel a subscription, sometimes it'll come back and offer you a discount.
Yeah.
And if the discount is worth it, you're like, yeah, you know what, I might hold on to that subscription anyway. Yeah. The amount of that discount can be calculated by AI.
What are you suggesting they're using for data though? What do they have access to? Your bank account?
It wouldn't be something like your bank account, but
Maybe your online spending habits or something?
like it's like I'm not familiar with the exact sort of data that they're capturing. I doubt it's anything as severe as bank accounts, but
Interesting.
like it's the idea that by tracking your online behavior, we can draw inferences about your
Yes.
behavior.
Yes.
And some of your behavior, like let's say for example, if you make it all the way to the checkout card in an online shop, we might not need your bank data in order to ascertain that you made a transaction.
Yes.
But the
Yes.
fact that you made it to that page tells us something about your online
Yeah.
behavior.
Yes. Yes.
So by drawing
so-
the dot between how you got to the checkout, what pages you clicked on, how long you were looking at them for, any news topics of interest or any other media or content that you were consuming prior to that purchasing decision,
Yeah. Yeah.
they can start to tailor, okay, how
Yeah.
can we create the conditions
Yeah.
whereby we're maximizing the probability that someone will click yes.
Yes. And this is the behavioral modification that we were talking about last time.
So it's manipulation basically. This stuff on steroids is like Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
Did you guys hear about that or?
Yes. Yes, definitely have.
Oh,
Yeah.
run me by it again.
So look, my understanding of the whole thing is quite hazy, but from what I did understand, Cambridge Analytica were using a lot of Facebook information in order to determine people's voting preferences.
Wow.
And by determining their voting preferences, they were able to, I don't know if they were creating content or if they were advising on content creation or driving some of it, but basically they were influencing people's voting preferences.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Through detailed understandings of their voting preferences to begin with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is how this stuff can get misused
Yeah.
in democratic
I think
process.
they were definitely targeting people through specialized propaganda, which, even led to kind of, I hate using this word, but let's just say it because it's probably the most appropriate use of it, but misinformation campaigns. So they were deliberately giving people the wrong information about election day matters, like telling them the wrong dates for when the vote was going to be, depending on your location or your voting preferences. And like the Republican Party, I know for a fact in America has a very sophisticated AI system that is basically a version of data analytica, and is able to tell with, pretty scary accuracy a voting profile on most people that are registered voters in America. So it knows who you're going to vote for, probably better than you do.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so they're able to use that information to target not voters that vote for the Republican Party and not voters that vote for even the Democrats, but people that are potentially third-party voters or swing voters. So these people in that camp are the ones that potentially can be bought by either side, and so they're the most crucial in an election. And so these very, very complex systems use a lot of data on individuals throughout the US, and they can predict with pretty crazy accuracy, depending on what they're looking at, like Kareem was saying, what articles they've just read, how long they've spent surfing the internet on a certain issue, or who they've been listening to speak on their favorite social media platform of choice. And then it will be able to target towards them specifically ad campaigns from whatever party. But like from what I understand, the Republican Party version of this, I forget what its name is, but is very, very sophisticated. Very sophisticated. And this is exactly the type of behavioral modification stuff we were talking about. I think the word you used before, Kareem, was manipulation. I think that word's better because it's a bit dirtier, and it's hell more accurate, because that you are being manipulated specifically based on your data.
The way I think about it these days is, and I hope I'm not sounding too pessimistic by this, because I think there are instances in which this stuff can be used for good. Yeah. Like if the case in favor of calling it behavioral change is if you're able to affect a positive result within society out of this information. Yeah. But the way I try and think about it these days is, like, one of my favorite quotes of all time is, what gets measured gets managed, by Peter Drucker. So it's the idea that if we can measure something, if we can measure anything, like if that thing that we're measuring is as simple as, did you tick a box or leave it open, then the point in time that we can measure that, and we can measure the other stuff around it, like what were the conditions around which you tick that box, then we can start to find patterns in terms of when you clicked the box and when you didn't. And the point in time that we can find those patterns, we can start to create the conditions for you to tick that box, which means we can manipulate you into ticking that box.
Yeah.
Basically. So,
and this is the final frontier when it comes to like living organisms, is the idea of free will. So if you can basically put a data point or assign a data set to, kind of every feature or every kind of possible response or interaction that somebody's going to have with something, then you can basically, stop, go, or open up certain channels for them to go down and like kind of basically predict where they're going to move or what they're going to do next, kind of thing. And then it starts to become a question of whether or not somebody really has free will or not anymore in a certain situation, especially in a digital space, because you can literally control everything that someone is doing. It's much more difficult to do that in the real world or the public domain, but you can turn someone's head in a digital space or make sure they focus in on something or listen to only one thing by only allowing them to see certain content. And so this is, I think, in terms of all of this data world, is the final frontier is breaking down this idea that there is going to be free will in the digital realm. And like, if they have enough data on you, they can predict or manipulate what you're doing based on your behavior, your past behaviors, based on your habits, based on your preferences and your likes and all of that sort of stuff. This is why this is such scary territory where we're going, and why Giannis talks about data sovereignty.
So can I, like, you're 100% right about all that stuff. But I don't want to paint a doom and gloom picture either. So I'm hoping to share with you a vision of what I think, like, ethical data use could look like, and what digital twinning within the concept of, like within the paradigm of facilitating democratic processes might actually look like. And I think that...
Please indulge us, Kareem.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're on the right think tank for it, that's for sure.
Yeah, perfect. All right, great. So look, the benefit. I won't go into the benefits just yet. I'll just sort of share with you what you know what the idea looks like at a high level. But
Okay.
imagine if all of that data that we were talking about from your online footprint and stuff is centralized and is used to determine which way you might vote on certain bills of legislation that are making their way through Parliament at the moment. Yeah. Now, I'm picturing this sort of integrated into a hybrid system where we've still got elected officials. Yeah. But those elected officials now have access to aggregate data on what our digital twins would vote on, like which way they would vote on whatever issues our elected official actually has to make a decision on. Yeah. Now with the digital twin, I'm picturing an app where, in order for you to retain agency over whether or not you would actually vote the way the AI algorithm is suggesting, what if you were given like a feed of all the things that are upcoming that your elected official might have to vote on, and the AI generates a recommendation as to which way it would actually vote on your behalf. Now, if you're looking at this feed and you're having a look at say, a bill that's coming up and it's saying you're going to vote yay for it, like based on the data that we've determined, we would say you're voting yay, and you disagree with that, then what you can do is you can go ahead and correct that decision by saying, no, I don't actually want to vote for this one. And the algorithm will learn over time what your voting preferences are if you continue to give it feedback like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ah.
So if you do absolutely nothing, then the AI will make a recommendation on your behalf and feed that recommendation through to your elected official. But if you want to be more involved in the democratic process, then you could spend all day looking at whatever bills are coming up on, say, a federal, state, and local level. Have your say with regards to which way you think people should be voting on it, and there should be a much more like participatory form of democratic process.
Yes.
Now, if the elected official gets all this information that their constituents want them to vote a certain way, they're not bound by whatever the public says, but they can choose to vote the other way. Yeah. But if they make a decision to do that, they've then got to justify why they did that.
Yeah.
So if they're forced to give a justification along with it, then they're going to be held accountable for not going with what the majority of their constituents want.
Yeah. It's I think we say in Australia, keeping the bastards honest is a good way of ensuring that to a certain extent, or like, if you're going to go against the tide of what your constituents think is acceptable, and you have to put a justification in, and your justification is, oh, well, I just met with that lobby group and they took me out to dinner and it was lovely and they just donated to the party. People aren't going to really kind of respect that opinion moving forward. So it is a good way of providing a lot of transparency potentially in the political process. Now, I would like to take your hypothetical scenario and develop it into a situation where, or at least question you as to why you still think that representation is necessary in that system. It sounds so automated that you could effectively have consensus at the electorate level. If not consensus, at least some type of majority rules situation, and you could just pass it on the majority of votes.
The main reason at this stage why we can't fully automate the process is because we don't know to what extent the data that we do have about your voting preferences will actually influence which way you vote.
Okay.
Now, the only way to get that data is to give you an actual vote.
Yep.
Yeah. So if we're collecting which way you would vote,
Yep.
in addition to the data that we have, we can start to get a more accurate picture
Yes.
of like how these things actually influence you.
Hmm.
In the first instance, it's just a guess, yeah,
Yes.
which may or may not be representative of
Hmm.
how you would actually vote. So we've got to give that system time to
Yes.
improve before it's ready for full autonomy. But
Yes.
even then, like you'd still find like biases in the data set. You'd still find like other issues around like data privacy and security, like a whole bunch of other hurdles you've got to cross.
Kareem, do you mind if I do a little edit to your what you've just proposed instead of a representative? Because I think maybe there's two basically forms of this. There's obviously representatives that obviously go like they sit for a certain amount of period, whether that's 3 or whether that's like 4 years, for example. But then there's a variation of that which is called a delegate. And what a delegate is yes, it's much like a representative where you have a group of people that are within a certain area, and you have somebody who is elected. But the difference between a representative and a delegate is that a delegate is automatically and pretty much straight away held accountable to an area or a group, where if the group finds that uh, they're not being representative by this delegate, they can pretty much immediately recall them and then send somebody else. So, is there a reason why, I guess, in this much more democratic version of digital twinning, is that I don't think you run the risk of, say, in a traditional delegate versus a representative scenario where you know, you have delegates coming in and out and in and out. I feel like because you have that direct accountability and the fact that the delegate knows that they are going to be scrutinized within a second if they don't go along with what the public deem acceptable, um, you know, is there a reason why you would go to, say, a representative compared to a delegate? Like, are you happy to make that concede if I change it up and produce a model that is more accountable to a delegate rather than to a representative till the end of their term?
Well,
Do you see where I'm going with that?
yeah. I guess in terms of the difference between a delegate and a representative and what sort of turnover you can expect in that role. Um, yeah, look, what's funny is when I was checking this out with ChatGPT before, just asking what does it think about this idea. Um, one of one of the challenges that it
Tell us,
anticipated,
what did ChatGPT say?
it like I don't remember the exact words, but it gave the impression that the delegates or representatives, if they chose to go against, um, if they chose to vote against the public, that they'd pretty much get crucified for it.
Like, it's
Um,
political suicide sometimes going against the majority, especially, but like this
yeah,
is the protection
so
that a
like
representative gets.
it was raising the point of like kind of like you guys are now, is in that situation, if you're going to go against the public, do you even need a representative or
And
delegate in that situation to begin
that's
with?
fundamentally what I was asking. Is there a reason why there was a representative built into this system?
So,
Did you have it like as a
two
fail
reasons for
safe
me.
or okay, yeah,
Two reasons for me. Firstly, it integrates well with the current system.
okay,
That's the first protocol, is that or it drives um, data driven decision making on a policy level at a
yeah,
higher scale,
Right.
and it's scalable. So you could bring it into like local government first, and then state government, and then federal government. So in terms of how well it fits into the existing system, it doesn't disrupt power structures too much. You don't have to build a whole lot of trust in the system. You don't have to
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not sort of relying on it instantly straight away.
Hmm.
Um,
And sorry, can I just ask you then, as an organizational psychologist, is that an issue that you find in organizations if you kind of like uplift or uproot a system and bring one in that's completely different? Do people have is there a lot of shock and people not able to handle such a big change all at once? And they're more, I don't know, accepting of something if you kind of change it little bit by little bit and keep some elements of the
There's
old system
yeah,
and
there's an entire, like, I'll call it a branch of science around change management,
okay.
and what types of change, what you can do to facilitate effective changes, and what the barriers to change might be. And
Okay.
you're right, there are, yeah, sometimes it can be in our intrinsic nature to be somewhat resistant to change,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
especially if we don't fully understand what the benefit is,
Yeah.
or why we're going through it. Like if and if there's a huge sort of inconvenience or disruption in
Yeah.
our daily
Yeah.
lives that's
Yeah.
associated with the
Mm.
change. So I think if you can minimize that disruption, there's a greater chance that whatever change you're trying to make actually will have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
But I think the other reason why I think representatives are still sort of needed in the system is because um, it's too much to ask, at least at this stage, to get us to put that level of trust in an AI system without human oversight. Like we tend to want human oversight over AI systems, like especially in these early stages. Um, so if you make it to the finish line with, say, a prospective bill that's coming up, and we figured out which way the public's going to vote, there's still a chance that everyone could be missing something that the representative has had a deep think about, and then once they actually raise their concerns, they're able to change public opinion on something.
Mm.
Like it's still like it's possible that, you know, out of all the potential impacts that passing this piece of legislation might have, that everybody skipped over something that wound up actually being really crucial. And it
Yeah.
might have been a low probability event chance of happening, but we determined that the risks of this happening
Mm.
warrant
Yeah.
not passing this legislation or passing this
Okay.
legislation.
So like this is like a safety check thing. So like it's in the
Pretty
same
much,
way
just
that we
human
design
in the
our
loop stuff, like,
human in the loop. Yes.
yeah.
That's the
So
novel we're all gonna write. That's it. That's the
Yeah.
one.
um,
Yeah.
like it's just making sure that there is someone who is held accountable
Mm.
for the
Mm.
decisions at the end of the day, who is
Yeah.
double checking what is the output of this stuff,
Mm.
and is able to communicate to the public, hey, look, this is the message I'm getting, this is what I think.
Yeah.
um, I reckon the AI got it wrong on this one, or I reckon, you know, the public is missing something crucial here, and I've got to bring it to your attention. So I think
Yeah.
that there are still going to be cases in which it is appropriate to buck the trend,
Yeah.
but we're not going to know what those cases are unless we've got humans in the loop. So
Yeah. 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 It's a good point. It's a good point. It's
But
kind of
can't you?
like
Yeah, go for it.
no, please, for it.
All I was going to say is, well, can't you eventually make a case of, yeah, you can do representatives at first, but then once people get used to the technology and maybe see the advantages of this sort of thing, and maybe because at least nowadays people are very much switched off politics. So if you're able to create something like this with a digital twin, and able to actually dial people into this structure, uh, could could you eventually get to a weaning off period? So okay, people are used to representatives now, and at least they have that sort of we need that sort of accountability which is within the system. But then once people get used to it, we move on to delegates, and then once people get used to delegates, then we can get something closer to direct democracy, because people are very much looking at like the legislation that's put forth, or the most pressing issue of the day, and you are getting that sort of feedback from people because they can see that their voice is actually making a change to society.
The part that I love is how you guys are more excited about going fully autonomous than I am.
Yeah, I am really excited about that, Kareem.
Which is quite strange. To be honest, I'm not used to being the guy who's like, hang on now, figure it out. Anyway.
Well, actually,
Which
I
is,
am going to get to that, but I'll let you answer first.
but look, I think the other thing which we've sort of swept under the radar is digital divide. The digital divide stuff is really real in that if you've got access to technology, you've got access to democracy. If you don't have access to technology, you're now in the minority and you're going to be underrepresented and you're not going to have a voice in government. Uh, and I don't think there's any simple solutions with regards to bridging that digital divide. And even if you do, scale that divide in terms of access to technology, literacy with it, and different levels of interest or different levels of I guess political involvement are going to wind up creating situations in which there is unequal representation. So we're looking at it as though it could facilitate direct democracy. It also could have a negative impact on it in other sort of unanticipated ways. But
Let me respond to that by giving you an example of how ineffective our current system is. Like, this example doesn't really apply to Australia because for our foreign listeners, we have mandatory voting here. So unless you want to get a fine, you rock up and you know, exercise your democratic rights and your civil responsibilities as a citizen of a sovereign nation, can I just add? But like, let's take the example of America or France or something like that. They don't have the logistics or the infrastructure to actually have everyone of voting age rock up on election day at the federal level, let's say, to actually vote. They don't have it. So I hear you on what you're saying in terms of like there is a digital divide. Okay, there are people that are not integrated with technology, information technology specifically, in this country or in a lot of parts of the world, and so they would basically not exist, and so they would effectively not be able to integrate effectively with this system, and so there would be a level of inequality in that regard, or inequity, because they just don't have the physical connection to whatever digital infrastructure is required, or two, because of their low levels of digital literacy, let's call it, they wouldn't be able to function in that environment appropriately to be able to give good feedback to the system. And so then, like, even if they were participating, maybe they weren't participating as good as everyone else or their neighbor, and so maybe they would be disadvantaged by that. I think the current system is riddled with those types of scenarios. There are people that are politically literate and savvy, and there are people that just absolutely don't care at all, and like they don't take it upon themselves to be politically literate or savvy at all. They are apathetic and they really just don't care. And I think that comes down to a choice, and like politics isn't sexy and a lot of people just don't like that sort of stuff. And like I said before, there's just logistically in a lot of places, there's just not the ability for people to actually participate in democracy. Even though they live in democratic societies, they might have to vote on a Tuesday or something like that. And like, in order to vote on a Tuesday, and you have to line up at your polling station for like 6 hours or 8 hours. Like, this is just completely strange to Australians, but like, in some countries this happens. And so like people have to make, the decision between eating like for the day because they're not going to get paid, or voting, and they're going to choose to vote. So like this type of stuff already exists in the current system. All I'm saying is that I don't think anything's going to be perfect for everyone. because we don't have that luxury at the moment. But I find, or I would envisage, that if this type of situation was ever going to happen, what we're talking about now, it wouldn't be happening for at least, if we're optimistic, a couple of decades, I think, if not longer. And like the amount of people, like, potentially our grandparents or older generations, the amount of people that are digitally illiterate in those generations far exceed younger generations. And like people are starting to get more and more plugged in, let's say, and like are starting to form their digital twins from much earlier ages as well. And they've got their online presences. So I do think that, like, in a couple of decades time, if not a little bit longer, this type of conversation will start to become more realistic. And then some of these types of issues may fall away a little bit, at least.
I think it's something that's worth looking forward to, and I think that like technology could enable systems of government that we haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
It's possible that we might choose to reorganize society in ways that like we haven't even fully thought through yet, because we haven't conceptualized the technology to facilitate it. So I agree that it is something that's worth looking forward to. I guess in terms of it going fully autonomous though, that would be a more feasible situation. Like once the algorithms had time to sort of be refined based on feedback that it's gotten about your voting preferences, and you need, I don't know how much time you'd need before the thing actually became accurate, but you'd be able to sort of gauge its accuracy levels over time and sort of figure out when it's starting to get close to 100%. But you should be able to, like, part of the trend in what they call explainable AI is having these mechanisms whereby you can interrogate how an AI came to the decision that it came to. So if your digital twin, or the data that you're leaving behind everywhere you go, tells your digital twin that this is the way in which you would vote, and it winds up being, let's say, it could get controversial, but
Do it.
let's say you're a vegan, and there's a bill about animal rights, yeah, and you're thinking that all your online information, if anyone knows anything about you, they should know that you would vote against this animal rights bill, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't know what the specifics of it. I'm just hypothetical example. And then you take a look at the AI system, and it says that you would vote the other way. And then you should be able to go in and ask it for an explanation around, hey, why are you saying that I would vote this way when all the data that you should have indicates that this is the way that I would vote about it. The next question becomes, okay, which parts of my digital twin is it relying on to make these decisions or to make these recommendations? And would that make us more aware of the types of interactions that we're having online?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you kind of brought this up, because when I was actually looking at digital twinning, and at least in the much more democratic version of its potentiality, it brought up to me, look, I'm about to go into a massive philosophy concept, but bear with me. It brought up the ship of Theseus paradox, about identity and whether something is the same or whether it's different. And long story short, the ship of Theseus is it's this thought experiment where the ship of Theseus is traveling the Aegean, and along Theseus's adventures, he has to replace the planks of the ship as they go. But if during his journey he has to replace every single plank, if he replaces everything, including the last plank on the ship, is that exactly the same ship, or is it a new ship entirely? So I
Hmm.
hope you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
If we
yeah,
create a digital copy or a digital twin of ourselves, and it has more information than us, is it our digital twin, or is it a completely new entity entirely?
yeah.
So I think you might have uh, talked out of that paradox with the whole it it talks to you to talk to it to talk to you kind of scenario where
Like,
like you're giving the various feedback, but
yeah.
or do you think it actually does fall into that paradox?
So this is a fascinating question. I'm glad you brought this up actually, because on the one hand, like if you're aware that your data is influencing your digital twin in some ways that you're not proud of, then you might feel some compulsion or obligation to change the data in a way that influences your digital twin to be more consistent with who you are or more representative of who you are. The part that I find fascinating is, let's say we know that on the World Wide Web, um, there are people who, behind the filter of anonymity, may behave in ways that they would not behave to a person's face. Um,
Uh, yes, yes, that happens a lot. Yes, yes.
um, now, how much of that stuff could potentially influence a digital twin?
Hmm.
And would
Yes.
that
Could you
stuff,
imagine how abusive your digital twin was if you were just like a professional troll? But
if
like you're not really like that. Yeah.
if it does wind up influencing a digital twin, and we somehow develop an awareness over this that, oh, hang on,
Hmm.
like there's actually implications of this,
Yeah.
does that then put pressure on us to change our behavior online
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
those data sources aren't reading or aren't telling our digital twin stuff that we don't want it to know?
Hmm.
Um, the ethical implications of that, does that raise the standard of behavior on the internet as a whole?
Right.
I think fascinating, but I think like looking at it in terms of the ship of Theseus paradox, um, is that who you are anymore? Is your digital twin the way you behave? Keeping in mind that if you do stuff online that you wouldn't do to a person's face, then your digital twin already might not be the most accurate
Yeah.
representation of who you are.
And like I
Does
don't think it is. Like for example, myself, like very recently I have been deep diving into watching these conservative slash right wing, I don't know, influencers or pundits in America go to university campuses and like destroy liberals and stuff like that. And like that is not my cup of tea in the sense that like I don't politically associate or affiliate with these types of people, but I'm trying to get an understanding of their mindset. So I am trawling through a lot of their content. And like the more time I spend doing this, the more the algorithm's just like, oh my God, he must have had some type of life-changing experience and he's
yeah,
now a
right,
hardcore right winger. You
right.
know, he's
Perfect
potentially
example
going to join some type of
digital twin
private
going wrong.
militia group and like this is influencing my digital twin, which is
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying. And so like my digital twin right now compared to like a week ago has just had like a political reawakening. And so like if it was going to start voting for me, it'd be doing some pretty crazy stuff
yeah,
right now. And like I am consciously and deliberately manipulating my online presence right now because I want the algorithm to give me the most outrageous stuff out there so I can see what these people are doing and what is drawing in that type of crowd. But this, compared to, I guess you would say, me in the physical reality or the physical form, they are very different people right now. My twin doesn't represent me very well as a person. So if I could just go right back to the start of this conversation when you first brought up this hypothetical, when you have said that we seem to be very keen about making everything like automated in terms of voting, my vision for a system like this has never been to take the voter out of the situation based on their data. But it'd be like, let's just say if every day or every week you had to fill out like, 100 tick boxes, right, on different bills or pieces of legislation or amendments to bills or things like that that were going to be done. And you had to go through and tick 100 boxes a week, which would be pretty arduous for some. Some people might love it, and others, or a majority of people, wouldn't want to have to deal with it. If you had, at the start of like when you first came onto that page, all of the boxes ticked for you based on your digital twin, and based on your data and your preferences online, it made assumptions about what you would choose. But it would be your responsibility to go down right to the bottom and say, yeah, agree to all of these. And if you click agree and you haven't actually checked each one of those 100 points yourself, and you're happy to just go with what your digital twin would do, then you've still signed it and said down the bottom, yes, I fully aware and I'm happy to go with these pre-selected options. I have reviewed them and I'm signing my autonomy away in this sense. But like the option is there that you can actually check them all individually. It's just that they're pre-populated, so you don't have to go through the 100 if you don't want to. And for any reason, if you, let's say every 10 weeks, you decided to just double check your digital self, and was like, oh, wait, that was wrong on 90 out of 100 things. My God, this is really far away. I better start paying closer attention to this. The responsibility is on you. You, at the end of the day, as the voter, you don't have to go with what your digital self is saying. You need to select consciously whether you're just happy to let your digital self do it every time. I think that is the world that I envisage with this type of stuff. So the automation is there, but it is not automatic, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we're picturing a similar kind of system here.
Okay.
I guess it's like, I think it is an arduous task to ask a person to tick 100 boxes a week. So, but like if we're thinking in terms of how can technology facilitate or further improve participation in democratic processes, imagine the system that you've described. But let's say I start the process of going over these 100 boxes, but I don't finish. And every week I don't finish because I'm not reviewing 100 pieces of legislation. If the AI were able to rank for me in terms of, stuff that it's not entirely sure how I would vote one way or the other, so maybe those fringe cases or those border cases, and prioritize those at the top for review, then that'd be an added bonus. Or if the AI is able to work out, based on my preferences, these are the pieces of legislation that we think you'll have the strongest opinion about.
Yep.
So this is the stuff that we think you're going to feel most passionately about. So we really want to make sure that we're getting your vote right on this stuff. Then I might not need to get to the list through the whole list of 100. I might just be able to tick off a couple at the top, and that'll be enough for me, at the start of every week, or however often you want to do it. But trying to work out because there's a bit of a sweet spot in terms of catering to differing levels of democratic participation. Like the trade-off is convenience versus agency. Yeah. So on the one hand, we want the ship running smoothly, but we also want to feel like we have a say in the process as well. Yeah. And that we can choose to participate as much or as little as we want in the process. So having that system, and I think we're both envisioning the same sort of system where you can tailor how much participation you have in the system, but it still runs fine without your participation. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to check because it did seem like there was potentially a discussion going on where you completely automate people out, and it would just be based on kind of data sets of their preferences and their nuances and like their
Yeah.
previous
No, I
habits
wouldn't
and
go
things like
that.
that.
The point in time you do that, you take people's agency away altogether,
Mm, mm.
and it stops being representative of like it stops being a system of empowerment.
Yeah,
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 and it starts being think about in that system where you didn't have direct access to which way you wanted to vote. The only other way to get your digital twin to accurately represent your voting preferences would be to change your online behavior.
yes,
That would
yes.
be the only way in which to manipulate it.
Yeah, like doing what I've been doing for the
Like
last week, like actually manipulating what's going on
which
online.
I
Yeah.
think it's a fun exercise.
It's crazy. Like you guys should just try it. Just like go start looking at something that completely
I
throws out
did it
your
at one
algorithm.
stage.
Yeah.
I remember going over right wing stuff and being like, "Hang on, I just want to get a feel for how people are thinking." It's good to expose ourselves to different
Yeah,
ways
yeah.
of thinking. It's one of the healthiest things that we can do.
Mm.
Uh, but your digital twin hates it.
Yeah, it'd be very confusing for my twin right now. They're having an
Yeah.
absolute
So
existential crisis and like they don't know whether they're coming or they're going. But like, I'm here for them whenever they need me and I'll correct the situation at some point. But right now, yeah,
yeah,
they're in absolute limbo and like they're questioning their reality, which is fine because they're digital. They really shouldn't have a reality anyway.
yeah.
But like
MysterE's a digital twin at the moment. At the moment is like, I swear I'm a leftist. I'm a leftist. I swear.
yeah,
I swear.
yeah, that's right. And they're about to buy a copy of Mein Kampf and start reading stuff. But like in this situation, though, can I just like really put the hypothetical out there? In a situation where you're having to choose between 100 different scenarios a week, and you're well more directly democratically involved in your society, what you were talking about just then about the idea that like if you were kind of taken out of the picture because it ran autonomously based on your preferences would be a situation of no agency. This is the exact situation that we've got at the moment. Every 4 years we get together and vote on some douchebag that's going to represent us in the bourgeois parliamentary system, and they make decisions on our behalf whether we voted for them or not, and they have all the agency and we have bugger all. And so like this, a system that got to a point where it was autonomous based on my actual preferences and my online presence, that learned from me if I was giving it feedback to a certain extent, I think would still be way more representative of my actual interests than, like I said, some douchebag career politician, which is what we have at the moment. But let me just finish my rant and just say, in a situation, right, where we had potentially what we're talking about here, where you had to sit down and go through 100 options a week and like painstakingly tick the box to say whether you approve that legislation or not, right? In ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, we like to think in the West, like they got together on a regular basis, voting citizens, and they would come together and decide on lots of things as a unit. Now, they didn't live in a capitalist society where they were bound by wage labor relations, and so they had to be at work doing a 9 to 5, like 5 days a week, like most people are bound by these types of obligations, and they only really have the weekend to catch up on all of their social obligations. In these societies, in the ancient societies, they all probably would have had access to slaves if they were in the right class and if they were like voting citizens. So they would have had people doing their laborious tasks for them and compensating for them when they were spending big portions of their week or their lifetime being democratic citizens, which means when you're a citizen in a democratic society, you have responsibilities. That's something that we have just completely lost any concept of in this day and age. We are more than happy to give it to someone else to do because we just can't be bothered. But like in those societies, they understood that if you wanted to have a democratic society, you had to do stuff Like, go to the assembly and stand around and talk or vote on issues. And so, like, in this type of scenario that we're talking about here, I am also envisaging concurrently a society where we don't have as many labor obligations. And maybe we only do a 4-day work week. Maybe we have a 3-day work week. Maybe we don't work at all in this current understanding of work. And so people dedicating a day out of a 7-day week to be like, let's call it Democracy Day. Everyone likes to talk about, like in Australia anyway, how we have, when we go voting, we have Sausage Sizzle Day, and everyone goes to vote and they have their sausage sizzle kind of thing. Like, we could have Democracy Day once a week and then followed by the weekend or something like that.
Once a week.
Sausage sizzle once a week, like, kind of thing. What a world. Like, this is the type of thing which would go hand in hand with this type of process. Like, I'm just saying, for a democracy to actually function, like, and do what we're talking about, I know convenience is important, but like, agency is paramount. And in order to have agency, at the end of the day, you have to have responsibility as well. Like, you just have to. As a citizen, there's responsibilities.
I totally get where you're coming from, particularly around the responsibility of citizens' part. I guess my contention is that, like, in the society that you're envisioning, where people don't have those labor obligations and are free to do whatever they want, you are still going to find people who like, you're still going to find the gradient of people in terms of how much agency they want within that system, in terms of how much of a say that they want to have in those democratic processes.
Yes.
And you need to be able to account for that in order to improve everyone's quality of life. Like, the reality is, the decisions that are getting made on potentially a daily basis, not all of them will impact our lives directly.
Yes.
So for the decisions that are less likely to impact on my life directly, I'm theoretically more willing to delegate to delegate my preference on that to, at the moment, it's a representative official, and to what extent that they actually are representing my preferences is a separate conversation entirely. But but you still have to, like you still have to cater to people who aren't necessarily shunning their societal responsibilities, but they're just more conscious of what they want to do with their time, and are choosing to not be involved as much in that democratic process.
Yes.
It could be because they just don't feel as passionately about some of the issues, or because that it doesn't actually affect their life directly.
And like I said, like in the system that I was envisaging before, it would be like, look, these are all pre-populated. So if you're just happy to press accept all and continue each time, your democracy day is done. You start at 9 a.m. and you're finished by 9:05, and you've got the whole day because you want to go surfing or something like that. You go for it, buddy.
Actually,
but like, don't turn around and blame anyone.
Exactly.
If you one day
to win, like,
There's a choice. That's a choice.
Yeah, if you want it, it's on the table. But if you don't want it, then do whatever you want with your time, I guess.
That's right. That's right. But like, I think we need to accept the fact, or at least develop as a society a culture of being democratically involved in things. At the moment in Australia, we have a culture, that's why I brought up the sausage sizzle thing. Like, there is a culture around voting. Like, everyone accepts the fact that once every 4 years or once every term, whatever that period is, that we get together, we line up and we have a sausage, and like, that's a cultural thing now. Like, people accept that, like, almost like going to school. Like, it is illegal to not send children to school. And so whether you like it or not, they have to be integrated into the education system. There is a cultural obligation to educate children in our modern societies. It's just something that everybody has to do. Now, you can choose to homeschool them if you really want to, but if not, there is a public infrastructure out there that will take your children 4 or 5 days a week from, Monday to Friday between these certain hours. And like, it's actually, it's a responsibility of you as a parent or guardian to send them along to that institution. So like, there are certain things that become culturally ingrained in people, and they fit it into their daily life. They fit it into their schedules. And I don't think all I'm saying is, I don't think it's far-fetched to etch in democratic responsibilities as citizens of your country into your schedule somewhere, especially if we freed it up somewhere else.
But I think if the barriers to participation are reduced, that we could expect to see more active involvement. And I think that that would definitely be one of the benefits of the type of system that both of us are proposing. I do want to get your take on something though, because and again, I'm not sure how controversial this is, but the way I sort of see the political landscape at the moment is that the people who are disproportionately impacted by certain types of legislation, in my perspective, the people that I guess that cultural shift that you describe towards sort of being more actively involved in the process, I guess for people who are in those minorities, it becomes far more important for them to sort of raise their voice and to be involved in those processes, because by nature of being a majority, your voice isn't. I guess your voice may not be adequately represented within the existing system. So the byproduct of not having representation within the system is that your voice kind of has to get louder in order to be heard. So when I think about more active involvement in democratic processes, like what's your take on what I'm like? Am I on the mark here in terms of describing like differing levels of political involvement? Or
No, there is definitely a phenomena out there that, like, especially in the representative form of government, that like certain minority groups or minority interest groups out there within the general population aren't represented sufficiently, and so issues that they have that require government policy and government decision making to enable them to have a better quality of life or have better access to things which they should get as citizens anyway, is reduced when compared to larger interest groups. That's what you're talking about, right?
yeah,
Like smaller groups of people basically have less of a voice because they can't be captured by the representative system,
yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Now, let me give you kind of the inverse or the perverse version of what you've described there. There are massive, no, not massive, there are very tiny interest groups with massive influence. And they are usually business interests or private interests that have lobby groups and exist in government. So the problem with the representational system is not the fact that like small interest groups can't get voices, but small groups who know how to play the system get absolutely like unproportional levels of influence over the governmental system and the democratic process that is just mind-boggling sometimes. So you have this one section at the other end of society that have no resources and no voice, and you have another section on the other end of the bell curve kind of thing that have, that is a very small and constrained interest group that have significant resources and a massive voice or representation in parliament. And that's kind of how the system works. I would say fundamentally the problem is with the way that our society is structured, as opposed to representative government itself. The problem is that, like, let me just say it like this. If you took money out of politics and like you didn't have people being able to donate to parties, and you didn't have politicians that were on potential big pay packets or couldn't leave their posts as politicians and walk straight onto the board of banks and major corporations and all that sort of thing, or like, take up stations as ambassadors to other countries because they know mates in the right places. If you took that element out of our representative government system, it would change significantly who gets the voice. But there is an inherent problem, I do think, in what you're explaining as the majority kind of rules situation. So there are small groups out there, even if you took money out, if they weren't able to form a majority in most cases, like got more than 50% of the vote, then they won't get represented somehow. So like, I do think that if you had a system where you had more regional representation in government, then you might be able to balance out smaller interest groups a little bit better. So at the moment in Australia, we have kind of a federal system. So we have the federal government, the state government, local governments. The state government for me is rather superfluous. It's not required. And the federal government for me is just kind of a conglomeration of large interest groups, largely small interest groups, but with lots of power. And so like, you could just take away federal government and you could take away state government. This is how I envisage a society which is like along the lines of what we've been talking about with digital twinning, where you just have local governments across the nation. And like Boreas has said, they send a delegate that goes to a federal government and they sit. So like every mayor in every local council across Australia would every local government area would send their mayor off to some delegates forum, and they'd pick a leader between themselves as like a prime minister or a president, and they could be the executor and go along to, do business trips and go to other countries for diplomatic missions and all that sort of stuff. But like basically you just have a group of mayors from all of the local governments across Australia, and they would make decisions on everything. And that would represent our regional specific interests a lot better. But again, still, that is only really dealing with the problem on a regional area. It doesn't, if you have a very multicultural region and maybe you have a small cultural group in there that's not getting a voice, it might be harder still for them. It is still hard for them at that level, even if it's very locally specific, to get their voice across. It's still hard. But like you get more chance at that local level, because at least, if your neighbor is in that minority group, you might have a conversation with them over the fence one day and be like, oh crap, they've got an issue. And then you can spread the word at your community level, and people will have more of a chance to understand and integrate with those people and get a hold of their issues. But once you take it to a state level, federal level, those possibilities are gone. It's just too macro level at that point.
There are like differences in the functions of local, state, and federal government, and there are like functions of those governments that are appropriate only to those levels. So say for example, your local park or your local I don't know, local basketball court. I mean, that's local government for a reason. Because that changes to your basketball court don't affect all local governments. Equally. Roads, hospitals, that stuff is looked after predominantly on a state level. Things like the defense of the country. You can't really put that stuff on a state level or a local government level, because you're just less effective at doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like the levels of government make sense. I guess the one level of government we haven't talked about that like I'm in favor of is world government. And
Hmm.
to some extent, that's what the UN represents. Now, the reason why stuff like the UN is necessary is because like we're now facing global problems like climate change, like that stuff.
Yep.
You can't slap together a whole bunch of local governments and expect them to be able to work it out. Like
Hmm.
you need leadership on a much higher level than that.
Yep.
And I guess if we're if we're talking about representation, there's this successive, I guess, centralization of power that happens. The further up the food chain that you go, and the idea of putting someone in charge to represent us because we're not all going to be able to get on the same page if we all go.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Sounds perfectly logical to me, and I don't think that's a problem that we're ever going to overcome. Like we need leaders, we need hierarchies
Mm.
on some level to be able to handle these kinds of problems. Like,
Look, I take that, and I would posit to you that it is more efficient, but it's not more logical. So, like, in the sense that, okay, you do need, like you've described, you said like certain infrastructure like roads and hospitals, a state level, let's say, but then the defense of the nation is a federal level issue, right? Because it requires the entire nation to be coordinated in a single effort. Makes sense. Now, what I am suggesting is that it's the levels of government themselves that are not required because the army or the armed forces is an institution. A hospital is an institution. Now, if they're regulated at the national level, you can still have a conglomeration of mayors who are effectively delegates or representatives of your region, and they go and form a federal government and they make decisions on the army and roads and hospitals and all that sort of stuff. So you can still just have a conglomeration, a federation of thousands of local governments across the nation that coalesce in terms of delegates. They send delegates or they send representatives who are appointed leaders of those regional areas to a larger form of government. Then they just make decisions on those big ticket items that you were talking about. They are making decisions and regulating the institutions themselves. It's not government out there that's running the army. It's not government out there that's running the hospital. They will probably pick senior bureaucrats to do that
yeah,
or high level technocrats to do those types of things, but you could still have that regulated with like a two-tier government system that other countries do run like that already. In terms of a world government, what you're talking about in that sense, I fully agree with. And like there is an understanding in socialism that once you get to the world stage in terms of, I guess, moving out of a capitalist system and out of a capitalist mode of production, and you had kind of a socialized version of society that was living across the country, you would basically have a world government scenario going on anyway. Because at the moment, we live in kind of class societies. We're divided up between different interest groups. But like, if there was a society that was based on the rule of the working class, let's call it, the working class is borderless. There's a working class in every nation. There are working people all across the globe, and their representation would be at a global level. They would send delegates of their regions, of their nations, of their areas to some type of world government, as you've described, to make decisions about what to do on really important global matters, like climate change, like what you were talking about, what we should be doing in terms of our global resource management. Should we be continuing to use sources of energy that are non-renewable? And like you need global coordination for that, because like you can stop, drilling for oil in your part of the world, but if you stopping doing that here means that everyone just goes and drills oil somewhere else, like it's absolutely pointless at the end of the day, because they're still going to be causing impacts to the environment. They're just going to do it somewhere else. So like there is a level of coordination that's required at the world level. I completely agree with that in order to grapple with the problems that are being presented to us here in the 21st century. How you do that though in a capitalist system, I have no idea, because I don't see that ever happening, because capitalist interests are very contradictory, especially at the global level. And like they don't want unity, capitalists that is, because they like to play between the lines. Like the only thing that's stopping or allowing like massive transnational corporations from like making billions of dollars in this country, let alone every other country on the face of the planet, and then paying no tax, is the fact that there isn't a global government out there that can actually regulate them. They can go and hide their money in the Cayman Islands or something like that, because there is no world government that can police that. But if there was a world government, I don't think the capitalist class would really like it that much, because they wouldn't be able to, like I said, play between the lines. And like in terms of data sovereignty, if we are true in terms of speaking about having actual data sovereignty in this world, like you as a person to really control what happens to your data and even get paid for your data, you need a global government for that. You would actually need a global government, because again, transnational corporations can take your data anywhere, and like they can set up in a country that'll set up laws and infrastructure for them to exist over there and not have to play ball and hand over data to people, because it's just too lucrative, the data mining game at the moment. We've already talked about like how people use it for marketing and for like various other nefarious means, and like they are not going to just, they've set up this stuff beautifully over the last 20 years, and they're not just going to hand over and allow people to take control of their own data. There's too much money in it. And the entire world at the moment is starting to turn towards using data for everything, from running governments to like selling things, to consuming things, to producing things on a global scale. Like it's being used in every industry now, data and data collection. And so like to flip the script now and all of a sudden say that, yeah, people have rights over their data and they should even be expected to be paid for it when people want to use it, is laughable, and would only be a world government that would be able to give people their own data sovereignty, I think.
The thing around, do you deserve to be paid for your data? Interesting within the digital twin lens, because if we're going to create a digital twin, should you be compensated for the creation of your digital twin? Now, I would argue that if you're going to use products and services of online businesses, that particularly if you're not paying for them, then the collection of your data is part of the agreement. No one's putting a gun to your head and making you use Facebook or making you use like any of these online services. There's clearly some type of benefit that you're deriving out of using the service. And if you are that opposed to it, then
I know. Just don't use the service. Unplug yourself from the entire world and just go live in the woods somewhere. Look, I've heard this argument used. Like, I'm not trying to like cut you off rudely or anything. But I've heard this argument used 1,000 times. All right, well, it's convenient. I want the app, so here's my data. No. If you actually spent the time to read the terms and conditions of this thing, which no one has really the capability to do. I have seen it written down somewhere that I think it was about 2015, they did a study on terms and conditions of various products and services I'm going to say the word, I'm just going to say it, that steal your data. And basically, they surveyed I think it was 100 products and services, and it would take the average person 72 hours straight of reading terms and conditions, because they'd have to reference other terms and conditions documents for third parties as well, not just the company that they're using or buying off, but the third parties they're also selling their data to who have their own terms and conditions, etc., etc. There's 72 hours of reading that goes into that. And like the level of language used in it, you would have to have at least some form of an undergraduate legal degree to be able to understand what they're talking about. Now, let me just say the idea that, okay, it's convenient means that you are therefore sacrificing the rights over your data is a non-goer for me, because they don't make it easy for you to actually read terms and conditions and to know what the hell is going on with your data. You really have no idea what is going on with your data when you agree to certain terms and conditions. And I think if we're going to talk about behavioral modification or manipulation, they know that people just click terms and conditions without reading, and they're banking on that. They are banking on that. And yes, if you really wanted to be like strict about it, you could be like, well, you know what? I don't want them to take my data. And like, you could just not exist in the digital world. You really could. You could just go live in the forest. But like, I don't really think that's an option in the 21st century. And most people, yes, it's convenient, but like they also kind of have to. You kind of have to have an email account in the modern day and age. You kind of have to have a social media platform of some sort to connect with people. You kind of have to have apps, even if you buy like an appliance now. Like they don't even give you the instruction booklet anymore. You got to log on, create a username, and sign in to the company's website to access the information, just to understand how the product works. So there are many nefarious, let's not say nefarious. There are many ways for them to get access to your data, if you know what I mean. I think
the QR code to understand the data, and then suddenly they're on your phone and they can sell you more products.
Yeah, and I'll have to get the statistic for you because it was incredible. But like, yes, it would take the average person 3 or 4 days of reading nonstop. So like, don't go to sleep, just read for the next 3 days, and for you to be able to understand all the terms and conditions that apply to this product or this service that you're using, because of all the third parties that get access to stuff as well. It was just mind-boggling, the types of stuff that people have to do, the hoops. And like, I would just put it to you right now that like 0% of people actually do that. Read everything.
I think they are starting to get better with that stuff. From what I've heard, there's been more of a push to write terms and condition agreements in layperson's terms, so that it's easy to understand. Last I heard, there was a push from some organizations to change the different font sizes for the stuff that's more important for you to read in those terms and condition agreements. And I guess the approach that I'm the biggest fan of is like when I go into my Google account now, I get individual options for what type of data I'm willing to let Google have. And the understanding behind why I would release that data is because it actually enables Google to personalize my experience. So the convenience aspect of using data to inform what Google shows me winds up paying dividends to me, because I can be a little bit more confident that what I'm looking at has gone through the filter of stuff that I might actually be interested in. So it's convenient on that level. But what Google did really well is they give me the opportunity to agree to certain types of data being sent and decline other types of data being sent. So say, for example, if there's one program which relies on my Google timeline, like my history of locations that I've been to, and it might also I don't know, use my email or something as well. I've got individual options to either accept or decline for my individual data from those programs to be used for those purposes. So part of part of the evolution that's necessary in order to make informed decisions around, do I want my data going here, or is this something I'd rather keep to myself, is an understanding of what is actually capable with your data.
Yeah.
Like what are the possibilities of how your data could be used to either improve your life or be used to get your money.
I'm fully across that there is input and feedback from data collection that is used to improve the user experience. What I'm saying though is that that is not the only reason that they're collecting your data. They might be having a conversation with you and deciding what your choices are when you tick those boxes or not, to try and get a better understanding of you as part of an aggregate number of users, to try and classify your group and put you into a little category of users, so then they can make money off you in some other way. And like, just because you say you don't want your data used for this specific process doesn't mean they're still not selling your data in some other way to a third party organization to make money off you from advertising revenue. So like, as much as your data can be used to improve the user experience, and like you can click boxes and stuff like that to say how you want your data to be used, one, I would say they don't limit it to that use, and they would still collect it and use it for other purposes, unless you read all of their terms and conditions and knew exactly what they were up to. And two, I would actually just have to ask you, even if you told Google or some company like that you didn't want them to use your data, do you trust them? There is no regulatory oversight of that to actually say whether or not they are listening to your requests or not. What is their obligation at the end of the day to even take that on board? It might just be another exercise in collecting data to say, oh yeah, Kareem over there looks pretty switched on. He's the type of guy that would actually say yes or no to these types of questions. Most people just ignore that and they're just collecting that as another data point. But like, I'm just saying, like, honestly, what faith do you have, or do you have any trust that they carry out your requests?
This is where we need to rely on government oversight to hold big tech accountable for this stuff. And I agree with you. I think that in terms of this is one of those problems that's more appropriate for world government.
I just don't see any other way.
But
yeah.
Look, this is the part that I don't think gets enough attention is like, what else could be done with this data? I mean, my fascination with this stuff comes from I guess, when I put my research hat on, getting access to this data could improve our understanding of human psychology in general. Like the types of patterns that we would be able to find between people's behavior, whether it be like online or in person, like the point in time that we can start like finding those patterns around what makes us tick, what makes us behave in certain ways. Like we can start capturing those societal dynamics with access to this big data. Like, and I mean, if you were to do it on an individual level, it's hard enough as it is with all the data that's floating out there to actually make any sense. This is what big data is all about. Like, it comes through at such an intense rate that you can't just eyeball it and have a look at what you're dealing with. You actually need systems in order to be able to interpret it and decode it and draw and extract meaningful insights from it. This is what makes AI so powerful. Now, the types of insights that you're looking for could be nefarious. They could advance a capitalist agenda. It could advance an authoritarian or totalitarian, agenda. But it could also be incredibly beneficial to humanity as well, to understand like how we're interacting with each other. Like this could actually, these insights could improve the quality of life for all. it could point us towards aspects of our own behavior that we don't fully understand.
Yes.
If we were able to find these patterns, and we could start making those changes, not only on an individual level but on a societal level, once we understand how our actions contribute to the whole. So I don't. The picture that I want to paint is, yes, data is data needs to be private for a reason. You deserve sovereignty over your data. Whether or not you should be paid for it, we might have to agree to disagree on that one. But I mean, it's entirely possible that your data could become so valuable at a point in time that the exchange for value or whatever convenience you're getting out of it at the moment stops being worth it. But I want to paint this picture of data as there's a whole lot of good stuff that we can do with it as well. Like if we're actually open to it, it's not all doom and gloom with the data.
No, it is massively good. It is massively good. Like the capabilities of what you can do with data sets, we've already talked about. We have spent already like a number of hours over other podcasts discussing how AI and like extensive data sets could revolutionize the way we organize ourselves as a human species and would project us into the future to heights and levels we couldn't even think possible in the current situation. So the capability and the use of data, I think, if used ethically, is just limitless, and like would basically, change us as humans, and for the better, might I add. But the problem is, and like I have to reduce it to this because everything in this world is reducible to this, is that everything has a price on it in this world. And so, unfortunately, data is not just this kind of wild, wild west scenario where people are like, your average AI explorer who just wants to play and like wants to learn kind of thing. Most of these people are using data just to make money off it. And if the profit motive, is the driving force behind any technological like basically the driving force behind anything really, then like it will boil down to a decision at one point as to what is more profitable, basically. And it won't always be an ethical decision in that case then, or it won't always be a decision about what is right for making this the best system possible or the most efficient system possible or the system that has the best like kind of scope to change humanity somehow and will advance us as a culture and as a society and all that sort of stuff. So until we, unfortunately, and this is a separate discussion and it's a large discussion on the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast, but like until we get rid of the profit motive behind this element of society, so the big tech world, until we get rid of that as an element, we're not going to be able to have a solely positive discussion about AI. I am more than happy to speak positively about AI because a lot of people do only focus on the doom and gloom and how it's going to replace humans and, et cetera, and we're all going to be out of jobs soon, et cetera. I don't see it like that. I see it like a hammer. It is a tool, and if you use it properly, it's going to save you a lot of effort and it's going to make your life better. And like, you've just got to use it right. And like, you can change it to make it better. You can make it like a better hammer or something like that. I don't know. But like, you can improve it over time to serve your needs better. And I think that's what AI is. And that's what AI should be doing. And like all of the data that we are collecting on people should be used to advance our political interests as well. And like make our political systems better, make our social organization better, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, unfortunately, right now, it's in the hands of massive corporations. And I think we're in a nice part at the moment, though, of AI's development. We're in the wild, wild west at the moment. And like they are putting things openly on the market for people just to play with. But once they have got control of whatever the hell it is that they want to control, they will start to clamp down on things and they'll lock everything behind a paywall. And like, we're just going to have to ride this wave, which is exciting, don't get me wrong, for as long as we can ride it and get what we can out of it.
Right.
I like the analogy, MysterE. You've probably heard this before, and the listeners have probably heard this before, but it was an analogy that Richard Dennis uses in his book Econobabble, which is basically talking about how economic speak and economic jargon is used against people just so they don't know what the hell a politician or a specialist is actually even talking about. And it's like, economics and jargon can be used like a tire iron. They can use to be prop up a tire and for you to change a tire on a car, or they can be used to bash somebody over the head. Obviously, one is its intended purpose, and another is the purpose that a big corporation or a politician that's trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
Mm.
And with that profit motive in there, we won't truly know the true capabilities of AI.
That's my thinking.
May have devised just today a very elegant solution to the problem of the profit motive not being conducive to ethical conduct. But honestly, it'd take me ages to go into the idea in detail. I'd love to discuss it offline with you guys because it might be worth a separate podcast episode.
Ooh.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
it might be my road to making billions.
Okay.
An MBA. When I was talking to
No offense, Kareem, but that kind of sounds counterintuitive.
I know. Totally. It's like I'm profit driven in terms of what I'm not ethical business practice. When you hear about it, it'll all make sense, and you'll be like, "Hey, that's actually a really good idea."
Okay, well that
So
might be.
just for context, I ran it past ChatGPT and Claude. Just to find, as I do with all my ideas these days, sort of testing it out, for feasibility. And the feedback that I was getting was this idea is worth billions.
Well. There you go.
I'm dying to share it with you. And it was talking about like all the positive impact that it could have in terms of ethical business practice, and what it does in terms of raising the bar for corporate social responsibility going forward. So, but look, I'll leave it for now. I won't mention it anymore for now. I'm dying to talk to you guys about it, but
There we go.
No, just not right now.
Okay, well, that's your teaser for the next episode.
Yeah.
Kareem, is that our resident AI explorer is going to solve getting past the profit motive. I've got to admit, I'm pretty intrigued.
Yeah, I am too. What a cliffhanger.
And
I'll give you a brief rundown after the podcast ends.
Okay.
And then if you want, I'll give you actually, you know what would be cool? If you know that Notebook LM thing I was talking about?
Yeah.
If I shove it into Notebook LM, generate a podcast for you guys, it'll probably be like 5 to 10 minutes long. Get you to have a listen to that and see what you think of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Kills two birds with one stone, because I actually want to look at this new model that you've talked about. I'm intrigued to see what it can do as well.
So the Notebook LM one. Have you played around with ChatGPT's O1 yet?
No, I haven't. Okay. I've only just heard of it.
This is the model that reasons. Yeah. So what you do is, like, you type in a prompt.
Yeah.
It will take some time to think to itself, and you can even look at its thinking process. Yeah, like it will go back over its thinking if it feels like it could have done better. And then it will lay out its thinking process, and then it will give you a response. The responses it's generating, like a significant advancement over the last generation of large language models. So,
is this related to Strawberry and all of those other?
Strawberry.
Oh, this is Strawberry, right?
Yeah. So Strawberry, I think it got renamed Orion, and then it got renamed O1. So it's O1 preview model at the moment. but I'm pretty sure you can use it for free on ChatGPT at the moment. So
I'm going
it's
to check it out.
handling some of the most complex stuff I can throw at it. Like I'm writing prompts that are like paragraphs long,
Mm.
and it's capturing every part of the prompt, and it's going into detail about
Yeah,
like every
wow.
question that I ask it, and doing like advanced projections of some really complicated prompts. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, I'm literally just throwing ideas at it all day, and it's keeping up. Like,
Still the number one prompt engineer. Still.
it's
AI
What are
Explorer.
these
We've been
days?
corrected We've been corrected today.
Prompt
Uh,
engineers might get upset at me.
no, it's all right.
This
We,
is
we
me.
believe you that you're an AI Explorer.
Engineer. Yeah.
Okay, and with that, that moves on to the last segment, which is what's that synthwave art? Look, I can tell you what the prompt is, Kareem, but do you want to have another crack?
I don't think it's digital twins. I'm not seeing anything that
No,
resembles digital twins in there.
hint, digital twins is in there.
Digital twins is in there.
Yes.
How is that reflected? But um, all right. Let me. Digital twins voting. That looks like a some sort of council chamber or something.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Um,
So, society creating a digital twin to speak for them in the parliament.
in Parliament. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's where you got confused because at the back it looks like he's got like security guards, but I think they're supposed to be the twins, and
Yeah,
like
I thought
he
about that, but I'm like, but they don't even look the same. Like you can't call them twins.
yeah, well, look, that's what they gave. That they gave, and like it's just randomly Big Ben's in the background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
It's because you wrote Parliament. They just thought British. A simple AI move that was. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the episode for today. Thank you so much for people tuning in and watching this or listening if you're at home. And again, thank you, Kareem. This is almost as if this is a pattern, you coming onto the show.
no, my
So thank
pleasure.
you
Love talking to you guys.
so yes, thank you for coming onto the show. And remember, everyone, to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And I'll hand it over to you, Mr. E, to sign us off.
Thank you very much, 4AS. And yes, a big thank you, Kareem, for joining us once more. It's been an epic conversation. Very, very, very interesting. And we've covered a lot of crazy, crazy territory today. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. And for everybody else, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.